Hi, I'm Manny Howard. This is Salon Talks. We're here today with Carla Hall, who's written a new cookbook called Soul Food. Welcome, Carla.
Thank you.
This is a fantastic book. I've read it. It's not just about soul food. It's about reclaiming soul food, which is a fascinating project I want to hear all about.
Interestingly enough, when I thought about doing this book, and I was thinking about how am I going to approach it, and I started with revolutionizing soul food, and then I was like, wait, there's nothing that needs to be revolutionized. It has to be reclaimed, and then sort of go back and bring it back from the past and take the past into the future. So that's what I wanted to do.
So when I read reclaimed, my first thought was, from who or from what?
I think that I feel that soul food is a cuisine, but people think of it as this very narrow box. And I think that it is so entrenched and enmeshed in American food or Southern food that soul food itself doesn't really get its proper place or due or platform. And so you could say reclaim it from Southern cuisine and maybe make that distinction, which is really hard because I think slaves kind of started this food. Those are the people who were cooking. So but it's reclaiming it in the sense that I think even for African Americans, even in my generation, if I say, oh, what's soul food? They're like, oh, mac and cheese and yams and, smothered pork chops and fried chicken. And it's more than that. Right.
All stuff that sounds like it'll kill you.
Right, exactly.
Right, on contact.
And that's the thing. And so if I am connected to this food through my culture, through the African diaspora, and you're telling me that my culture, my food will kill me, what does that say about who I am? I can't be proud of that.
Right. Right. And the move, as I understand it, from soul food meaning everything that you can eat, that's, because at first food that black folk cooked was food that was found or was allowed to be eaten, right? So there was a great tradition of broad ingredients.
Right.
And that changed during the Great Migration.
Correct.
Can you talk about that?
So I think that when you think about, and not to romanticize slavery, but when you are in a place and you are static, so you can have gardens, right. You're eating this food, so you're living off the land and the sea. You can fish for your food, you can have a garden, but then when you start to move and you're leaving the plantation and going north for the first Great Migration, now you're transient and you don't have a garden. So I think that's when food started to change, and there was more fried foods, and there was more foods that were thought to be unhealthy. But there were also slaves who were trained chefs. So everything wasn't just, oh, let me eat off the land and let me just cobble together something and I can only have this. Because in the kitchen were people like, oh shoot.
Well, I know Jefferson's cook went to France.
Hemmings. James Hemmings.
Right.
So he went to France and he was trained.
Right.
And so when he came back, he is influenced by the French. And so that changed food. Right. And he was actually the one, I just found this out last night, he was the one who decided to, once he was in France, he came back and he built this hearth, which was the great-great-great-great-grandfather of what the stove is now. So now you have the live fire, and now on top you have this stove with these places to put pots.
Right. So before that, there was more than one location where food was prepared, but he innovated this.
Exactly.
A proto stove.
Right.
Yeah.
Right.
Amazing. Yeah. So the first cookbook I ever bought was Craig Claiborne's Southern Cooking book. And I remember reading that book and thinking there's something wrong with this picture, because all the recipes that are in this book were not cooked by Craig Claiborne's descendants. They were cooked by somebody else, and even as a young man, I thought that something had happened that so we'd missed a step.
Right, and in that book, there was no mention of other people.
Right. No. None of the stories were. It was all about.
Right.
It was all about aunts and, and grandmothers.
And I think that is a really good example of appropriations. I think now people use that term really loosely and they're not sure what to call appropriations. But when you take someone's culture and you don't mention the people that it came from, that is appropriations. Right. And when you go to a restaurant and the only way you can work in that restaurant is to give up your recipes so that the owners can use them, that's appropriations. Right. And a lot of times when blacks, especially older, and they don't want to give you their recipes or they leave out a step or an ingredient, historically the reason why is because they don't trust people.
Right. Right, and it's a way of holding on to the legacy.
Even in your family, you're like, I'm your family. Can I get the whole recipe?
This doesn't taste like what you make.
Exactly. It's like, I don't know why.
And actually, there's one of the great elements in the book is all the characters that you introduced, all the people. Some people who left and came back with the mission of reintroducing the healthy food version into to the place that they had left years before.
Great Matthew
people.
Rayford, who is in Georgia, and he has a farm, and he's a 6th generation farmer. And so he has a restaurant. I forget the name of his restaurant. John Hall. I think that when I looked at all of these people, and this was definitely my story, where you get educated with French food, right, at a French culinary school, and then because you're educated in culinary arts, you run totally away from your culture. And then when you're working, you sort of hit, if you matriculate through the restaurant, you hit this cultural glass ceiling and you are not satisfied. And you're not moving up, you're not satisfied. Right. And it's like, what do I do? And I know for me, I eventually came back to this food, but it was because of Top Chef. When I was on Top Chef and just being stressed, in order to feel good, I made the foods that comforted me. Right. And then afterwards, people were saying, oh, you do comfort food. They never said soul food. Oh, you do comfort food. And I said, I guess I do. But I didn't think of it.
Comfort food is also appropriation of some kind, comfort food always meant something else to me whenever I saw it. Yeah. Can we wind it back a little bit, because we just started sort of in the middle of your biography. You didn't learn to cook at home, right?
No.
Can you give us that arc?
Yeah, I wasn't cooking. People assume because you're a chef, you've been growing up next to your mama, your grandmother, and cooking. I didn't start cooking until I was 24, 25. I wanted to do theater. Then I ended up majoring in accounting. So I was an accountant, got my CPA, worked for PricewaterhouseCoopers, but it was Pricewaterhouse at the time. And then hated it, left, went to Paris, started modeling. And there's stories in there how I got to modeling. It was from Howard, and then hated my job.
School at Howard.
Yeah, Howard University.
Right.
And I met these girls who were going to France, and I'm like, I'm going to do that because I have no idea what I want to do. And it wasn't a dream of mine. The modeling was a bridge between what I knew I didn't want to do and what I eventually wanted to do. And it was actually in France that I fell in love with food, and I started hanging out in the kitchen. When I was a kid, I was like, I'm going to be outside. When the food's ready, just call me, or I would cook for a Girl Scout badge. That was it.
Right.
that was
What's in it for me?
I know. Do I get a badge? Can I get something for this? And then I learned how everybody was telling these stories and all of the fun, and people were saying, well, my mother makes macaroni and cheese like this when I was in France. Well, my mother makes it like this. And I was like, wow, I have no idea. I actually have no idea. Right. So I started buying cookbooks. Mm-hmm.
Do you remember what the first one was?
The first one, and I was in France, and I went to W.H. Smith, the English bookstore, right? The English Borders. It was this book of soups and sandwiches, and I can't remember the name, but on the cover was this this rustic bread. And I remember getting that. I don't even know why I got that one. I'm just like, let me just have an English book, a book with English in it. And I started making dishes for my friends. And then the next book I got was a textbook that they were using at a culinary school in California. And that's when I found chicken pot pie. Right. You know? Right. I felt like it took me 2 weeks to make that chicken pot pie. I swear. It was like, you know, you got to poach the chicken, and then it's got to cool. That was another day. Right. You know, I was like, oh my God, it took me forever.
Chicken pot pie is final exam. Right?
Exactly.
Like, first you got to raise the chicken.
Exactly. You have to like mill the flour. I'm like, why is it taking so long? And then I was in France, and when I decided to make this for a friend, and there was no celery. And I found leeks. I'm like, well, celery leeks is the same color.
Like tall and green.
I know, right? You know, I was like, this will do. Right. It was crazy. I mean,
fennel, right?
Right. I could have chosen anything that was sorta-ish.
Is there no celery in France? Am I missing?
At the time, it wasn't. Well, I didn't see it. I mean, come on. I didn't know what I was. Barely knew what I was looking for. An onion. Find an onion, right? Right. So, it's amazing how I started there, and when I started this lunch delivery service as a fluke, my friends were like, you're cooking? Wait, you, the girl who made a tomato soup with 4 cans of tomato paste, you actually are cooking it? Who's buying it? What? Are they desperate? What's going on here? Right. I've come a long way.
Yeah. So I open the book, and I get 3 recipes for deviled eggs.
Yes.
Talk to me about deviled eggs.
Oh, come on. You can't have a party without a deviled egg. What's up? So deviled eggs those are the quintessential soul food staple, because deviled eggs would be in a box when you were traveling and you didn't know when you could stop, where you could stop.
When it was safe to stop.
If it was safe to stop. So you would have a shoebox, and in that shoebox there would be fried chicken. There would be an orange because you needed something to drink. Maybe you didn't get water, so you needed, to hydrate. There would be deviled eggs, and there would be pound cake, things that travel well. Although those deviled eggs don't sound like they would travel well, but this is what I've been told by Jessica Harris, who is a culinary historian and amazing. So deviled eggs are a thing that show up at every party. And interestingly enough, and I would get to the recipes, but I'm learning all of this stuff, which just fuels me and the interest and the excitement about my ancestors, because I didn't have that. I was like a child who was adopted and then finding out in retrospect all of these people who were in my family or history. Right. So I have a regular deviled egg, and then I have a shortcut deviled egg, do you like soft-boiled eggs?
Yes.
Okay.
Deeply.
I thought, okay, you are going to love this. I could probably just stop with this one right now, because I kept thinking deviled eggs are a pain in the ass to make. You have to boil them perfectly so that you don't get a green egg, so perfectly boiled eggs. Right. And then you have to peel them. Then you have to slice them and then take out the yolks and make the filling. But with this shortcut deviled egg, you take the soft egg, like 6-minute egg, soft, still runny yolk, and then you make the mayonnaise mixture with the mustard and everything that might go into the yolk, and then you pipe that onto the soft boiled egg, and then you take bread and butter pickles and you sprinkle those on top, because you know that relish is inside that egg.
Yeah. It's all,
Come
Stack it on top.
Right?
Yeah.
You would be just in hog heaven.
Yeah.
So I have that one, and I have another, traditional deviled egg, but they represent.
So, and then a couple of pages later, you've got creamed kale instead of creamed spinach.
Yes.
Right? And that was I saw that and I thought, no, there's an intention in that.
Yes. Well, now that the rest of the world knows kale.
Right.
Because, oh my God, when everyone says, oh, kale is a new vegetable, it's amazing. And I'm like, I've been eating that all my life.
T-shirts with kale.
Okay, right. I mean, the great thing about that, when the whole world or popular culture or your people, when you find something, the thing is you can find it everywhere. And so I knew that I would be able to get a raw vegetable somewhere on my journey, because before you just didn't see it.
Yeah.
You know, and so.
But it's just kale. It's not collards everywhere. It's not dandelion.
Right.
I mean, New York's a great place for vegetables because you can actually get dandelion greens.
You're right, dandelion greens, mustard greens, turnip greens. Turnip greens is still hard to find up here, I think.
Yeah.
I mean, the turnips are here.
Yeah.
What happened to the greens?
Right. And the beets come with the greens. So
Right.
Beet
greens.
Why not?
Exactly.
Turnip green. Yeah. So, and when I think it was in the Craig Claiborne Southern Food cookbook, which I'm going to stop saying his cookbook because your cookbook is actually the thing we're talking about. But
that's okay, but I get it.
Yeah, he suggested that I use a candy thermometer to make sure that the temperature of the cooking oil was exactly right. And in your book, you discuss the conversations that you have with the chicken as it's cooking, because you talk to them like they're your children as it's coming along. And that, to me, feels like a significant stylistic change.
Exactly. When you've been cooking something for a really long time, it's not intellectual. It is in your heart.
Right.
You take the flour. I've seen my grandmother do it. You put a little bit of that flour into the oil, and it's going to sizzle. You're like, okay, it's ready. And then you take that chicken, and you put it into the pan, and then you're going to start those little bubbles. You're going to see those little bubbles around that chicken. Right. And then you're going to keep turning that chicken. When that gets brown, you turn it over. You don't want that breast, which is heavier, if you're in a cast iron skillet, and that breast, which is heavy, if you don't keep turning that chicken, it's going to have a brown spot.
Right.
You know, like that, sitting out in the sun, a little bald spot, right? So you have to keep turning it. And the thing is, you will see through the meat and how it's crackling if it's ready. It's intuitive. It's an intuition. And I think that one of the things that I really try to get people to do is to be at one with their food and use all your senses.
Right.
Use your eyes, use your nose, use your ears, your sense of taste. Have you ever been to Sylvia's?
Yes.
Okay. Have you ever been in the kitchen?
I have not. Tell me.
Amazing.
Yeah.
When you go in there and they have some of the same people who are cooking there today, at least 2 guys who Sylvia hired.
Right.
And I was there doing a dinner, and there were these guys that were cooking everything, and they were looking at the greens, and they would pick the greens up, and they're looking at them like this. You know what they were looking for? How they fell when you held them up with the tongs, how they glistened if they were ready. It wasn't this intellectual thing.
Right.
When you're frying chicken, you're like, is it floating? Are the wing tips sort of crispy and almost translucent? They can tell it. They are whisperers of that food because they've been making it for so long. And from your book that you had that person didn't cook, because now what they're doing is getting all of these tools and intellectualizing all of this stuff because they can't tell when it's done. So they're going to tell you to get these other things so they can tell when it's done.
Yeah, that's right. Yeah. And for the uninitiated, can you describe what Sylvia's is? So that
yes.
Yeah.
So Sylvia's is a restaurant in Harlem.
Yep. And
it has been around for a long time. It's an institution where a lot of people came through, and maybe they couldn't. A lot of people would go slumming up there from downtown. They would go up to Sylvia's. A lot of African Americans, Black activists, everybody would stop in Sylvia's, and she had this restaurant that just sort of became this mainstay that's still there to this very day. The Woods family.
Right.
Mm-hmm.
Right.
Sylvia Woods.
It's a great place, and I don't know if I was slumming. I think I was, an inculcate.
Okay.
I was fully committed. I have to Oh, can we talk about meat and 3 veg?
Yes.
As an organizing principle for reclaimed soul food.
I just love how you went, can we talk about meat and 3 veg? Anybody from like Tennessee, meat and 3. We know that the 3 is the veg.
Yeah. Right. The English thing, as we, you know, I'm raised raised by English, is meat and 3 veg is the way you say that.
Right,
yeah,
yes.
Yeah. But potatoes count as a veg.
Of course.
Yeah.
I mean, macaroni
is that true
does too.
meat
Macaroni is a
and 3?
vegetable.
Yeah, right.
It is. Yeah. Absolutely, it is true. So when you go to a soul food restaurant, even a southern restaurant, and when you go to a restaurant in the South, you go down the line and you choose a meat and you get 3 sides, which are vegetables. And sometimes you'd have that divided plate. I could never choose with the vegetables, so I always chose the veggie plate, which was 4 sides.
Right. I was going to say, can I have 4?
Yeah, can I have 4? And my tray would look overflowing because it was like, is that all your food? Right. And then you would see the desserts first, which is perfect because you'd see that strawberry cake or a yellow cake with chocolate frosting or the coconut cake, right. chess pie, right? Pecan pie, sweet potato pie, not pumpkin, right. and a coconut cream pie. Yeah. Banana pudding. Yeah. So all those would be at first because right. you choose that. So that informs how you're gonna order, and then you get to the end and you choose a roll of cornbread, right, and then iced tea, sweet tea,
right, yeah. Which is different than iced tea.
Yes, it is sweetened. But up here, thank the baby Jesus that there are enough Southerners who travel that there is simple syrup. Right. You know, so
you can add it.
You can add it.
Right. You can back out of it.
Yeah.
Well, thank you so much for joining us here at Salon. It's a great pleasure, and it's a fantastic book, and it's so much fun and it's so informative. I can't tell you how great it is to meet you.
Well, thank you for having me. I think it'll start some good conversations and broaden people's idea of what soul food is.
Yes, I think that's exactly right.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Thanks.